Thank you very much. I am very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to you for you to spend the last session of the day and of the event with me, which is an honor. And I'm Eugenio, and I would like to spend the next 40 minutes sharing with you a little bit of our history in building a global distributed company, very distributed, as you will see. So my goal is to share with you why we did it, what are the challenges and obstacles that we faced, and hopefully you can learn from those and not make the same mistakes and head for success. So this is not a session about like how to tweak Jira and Confluence and all the, the 100 tips on that. So if you're expecting that kind of guidance, I think the guys in Atlassian will do a much better job at that. With that, let's start with the beginning. In 2013, I left Microsoft after 13 years working there to start a company, Auth0. And that was my dream. I wanted to build a company and always wanted to. And I knew all the difficulties in doing so, fundraising and hiring and building product and finding customers and whatnot. But the good news is that I found somebody that I trusted very much, that I could fight any battle with. And so I partnered with him and we started Auth0. But there was one catch. And the catch is that you can tell from my sexy Latin accent that I'm from Seattle. And Matías, my partner, he lives in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And that's like a lot of miles away from each other. Yeah. So we thought this would be like a big problem for us. Or, another spot, of all the challenges that we were facing in building Auth0. But as you will see, it turned out to be actually one of the best things that happened to us. And we'll see why. The very first lesson, and this is the very first lesson and guidance to you, pick up hotels, Airbnbs, coffee shops on the strength of this signal. Because if you can connect to the network, you can do everything, pretty much. It's amazing how far you can go just with a computer or a phone and with a good internet connection. We had a inside joke that it's all we need is really a mattress and Wi-Fi, but really good Wi-Fi. The mattress can be substandard. All right. Let me show you. I work with customers. So let me show you an internal video that we put together. It's a training video of what your day will likely look like. This is my day.
You get the access token, and then you call the API.
Exactly. First you get the access token, then you call your API. Exactly. You get the access token, and then you call your API. Exactly. You get the access token, and then you call the API. Exactly. First you get the access token, then you call your API. So putting aside the one where I'm welding or working with my car, the rest are all real. Actually, I've done conference calls and worked with customers, all those situations. And I would say as another best practice for you, walking your dog is the best. It's the best time, nobody interrupts you. She's awesome. She can learn, when I'm in a tough situation or not and wait for the ball and all of that. So fast forward 4 years since then, we built and we've grown the company to now be, this is a little bit outdated already. We are almost 220 employees all over the world, literally all over the world. We are in 30 different countries. I guess we are in all continents except Antarctica, perhaps. We have 2/3 of our company working remote. So that's 130 or 120 or so. So we do have 3 offices today. We have an office in Seattle, an office in Argentina, in BA, an office in London. We are about to open a new office in Sydney, in Australia, but they're not mandatory places. It's just that when we have enough critical mass there in one location, we just make sure that we have the infrastructure to support them. Even there's quite a bit of people in those locations that don't go every day to the office. I don't go every day to the office, even though I live very closely. Another best practice for you is this is something that we've done from day one, and it's we get together at least once per year, the entire company. It was very easy to do when we were 5 or 3 in the very, very early days. 2 months, a month ago or so, we went, the 200 of us, to Mexico, Cancun, to repeat this, this routine of seeing our faces and shaking our hands and drinking a beer and joking about the things that happened during the year. And to give you a sense of the, the volume of interactions that we have, that's in July, in just 1 month, recent months, that's a number of messages that we exchanged in our messaging platform. So what does Auth0 do? Very quickly, we are an authentication as a service company. So we power the login box of a number of services, or a number of applications out there. If you're an Atlassian customer, which I'm sure a few of you are, you're likely logging in through our service behind the scenes. If you're a Wall Street Journal subscriber, you are logging in with Auth0 as well. That's who we are and what we do. So, why remote? In researching for this presentation, I came up with a number of statistics which are pretty interesting. And in retrospect, now with the benefit of these 4 years and a half of experience, it's kind of like a no-brainer. It's how could we ever think about building something not this way, right? And I did a little of math for myself, and it turns out that in my time at Microsoft, I could have driven back and forth from Seattle to Buenos Aires. Guess what? 7 times driving, just the time I spent driving in all those years. 7 times, BA to Seattle. And I spent like thousands, I don't want to look at the number, thousands of dollars in gas, and just the time spent there. Thanks there's podcasts and there's good radio programs, I guess. So it's really a no-brainer. There's plenty of content and evidence that it's something that has tremendous benefits all around. But why did we do it? Putting aside the almost serendipity, how we started, it was like not really planned. I could tell you, yeah, we started the company with that in mind, but in reality we didn't. It was part of the context and the environment that we started working on. So the first thing that in reflecting on this is that talent is everywhere. In my team, one of the best technical writers that we have, she lives in Greece. She's not even an native English speaker, and she's amazing. We can find the best developer, or one of the best security developers, specialty in what we do. He lives literally in the middle of a fjord in Sweden, or somewhere up there, right, which is very dark for a long time during the day, or during the year. So talent is everywhere, and if there's one thing that we are looking for, is talent. And so this approach allows us to tap into a global pool of people that just happen to not live where you live, or we live. The second, which is a little bit related to this, if you live in Seattle or you live in San Francisco, you know that you're competing for that talent with behemoths, with companies that are tremendously resourceful. In Seattle, you have Microsoft, you have Google, you have Facebook, you have all these companies that offer all these amazing benefit packages. And so it is very difficult to compete, especially in the very early stages. When you hire somebody in Greece that might not be as attractive for a company like Microsoft, then you're at an advantage. And when you're building a company, you can use every advantage that you find. The third one is that we had an aspiration of building a global company. So if you think about it, authentication is a problem that developers face, that really doesn't matter what industry you're in. Which application can you think of that doesn't need to know who the users are? Very few. There's very few applications that fall into that category. So we wanted to build a universal platform, a platform that would, could be used for any application developer in the world, on any vertical. It could be financial services, could be in retail, in manufacturing, whatnot. And when you think about it, one of the benefits of hiring people that are in those specific locations, anybody from Germany, you guys have a lot of privacy considerations and security and things that we would be handicapped to understand on our own if we didn't have people that are breathing that reality over there. And finally, also related to that, is the fact that we want to be excellent. And to be excellent, sometimes you need to push yourself outside of the comfort zone and exercise muscles that you might not be aware of. And so a side effect of this is that you end up in an environment that pushes your boundaries a little bit, pushes the envelope into directions that at the end makes you better. And that's what we found happened. One best practice, another best practice for you is that I would strongly recommend that early on you set up who you are, your soul. And that's what we call our values. Now, we don't really have like values printed on the papers, on the walls, but we do have principles that we live and breathe, and we set up very early on. We hire against these values. We manage around these values. We evaluate performance. We look at managers from promoting these values. Solid foundations to build on top of. That's okay. So from all these, which are extracted from, it's a subset of all the company values, I would put an emphasis on 3. And I'll tell you why. One is the one in the middle, no jerks. Guess what? When you have a remote company, one of the big problems, as we will see, is that of communication. It's very easy to misinterpret things. I am not a native English speaker. I might say things that are offensive without knowing, right? And so you don't want somebody to take advantage of that or use that as a mechanism of power or whatnot. So we literally, that's like a non-starter. We can have the best developer for something, but if there's on character or in personality, or he's a jerk or she's a jerk, we don't hire them, right? And the other 2 are the ones related there. So we like to be, to think of ourselves as being a data-driven company. We use data because in the communication between us, there's a lot of room for ambiguity. And so when you tell something to somebody, you might miss, something might be missed in the channel, even though you're writing it down, or you're putting in a document, you're putting in a wiki or whatnot. So data is what drives a lot of our decisions. We run these experiments for everything we do. When we do a new release or we ship something new on the website, as an example, we measure everything, and so then it becomes a more objective discussion as opposed to competition for will or who is the strongest one that on a specific opinion. And the last one to keep an eye on, it is essential in a remote organization that we are open and that we tell people what we think, because a lot of the human communication is lost in the technical channels that we use every day. We know, I think there's plenty of research about it, that a lot of the human communication happens not on the words that we use, it happens on what I'm doing right now. It's like moving in my hand. I'm Italian, so I move hands. It's important that we know that when somebody tells us something, it's not acting, it's acting in our best interest, in our best, they want us to succeed. So we are a company where we encourage communication and feedback and improvement to happen all the time. So what are the things that you will likely to encounter, obstacles that you are likely to encounter? Well, the first one is no surprise. There's many. For this presentation, I chose we chose 3 main areas. As we will see, there's others. You will have contact information as well. So if you want to know more about this, I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation with you. But we chose the 3 that we think are the most critical ones and the ones to keep an eye on. The first one is hiring, of course, bringing the right people on the bus. The second one has to do with the way you collaborate and the way you communicate between each other, right? Especially as you grow. We are 220 now. Many layers of management, one additional people that you add into the pool, that it's multiplying effect on the number of exchanges that will happen. And the last one, not surprisingly, I will put an emphasis on leadership, because culture is something that you will define probably early on in your organization, but then how do you make sure that that culture, or the things that were important for me when we started the company, don't get lost in translation. So leadership building and putting in place the right processes, the right people in between the senior leadership and the rest of the organization is absolutely critical. Let's dive into this hiring. So it's, especially in the beginning, it's very easy to go and get someone to work for you as a freelancer, right? So it's a direct connection and that's it. As you grow and as you bring more people to the organization, having like one-to-one, like all these one-to-many and point-to-point contractual relationships with your employees, with your team, becomes unmanageable. And also, there's a lot of subtleties and issues that are related to what's happening in each of those locations. So one of the things that we discover very quickly is that instead of going directly, it is very beneficial to go through what's called a PEO. There's a typo there. It's not private employee organization. It's a professional employee organization. And these are companies that are typically global companies that you would formally hire your employees through. And this will only happen if you don't have an entity in those countries. So for us, we have entities in many countries today because we already have a number of employees in those geographies that justifies creating a legal entity in that place. So if you are in the US and we hire somebody from the US, you're technically and legally an employee of Auth0 Incorporated. And if you are an employee, if we hire an employee in Argentina, you are technically an employee of Auth0 Argentina, right? And the same in Australia, in England, and a few other places. But if you are the technical writer in Greece, and there's only one employee in Greece at the moment, or one guy in Nigeria, there's no sufficient justification to open an entity there yet. And so the safe route for you is to go through one of these organizations that will take off the burden of things like benefits or legal compliance, or if there's regulations around the whole life cycle of dealing with an employee. Okay? Second around hiring is compensation. And something that comes often when I speak with people about remote work first is like, oh, it's cheaper to hire somebody in South America, so that's why you went there. The reality it is not, right? And that's not the primary, shouldn't be the primary driver. But this should be one of your primary concerns, because this is very difficult to do, very hard. The professional employment organizations will help you, but it will not help you very much, because they are essentially more of a middleman, a legal middleman. You have to do your own research in here. And here's the examples of things that you will encounter. One is countries like Argentina in 2016 had a 40% inflation rate, right? So when you tell someone in the US that what 40% inflation rate is, they kind of look at you and say, well, what, 40%? Well, I lived there in my previous lives, and we had even worse than 40%. So You have to figure out a plan where the salaries for employees there are kind of don't lose competitive position, and so you need to adjust them very often, right? There are places where salaries are paid in 13 or 14 months. There's countries where the year is not divided in 12 months, salary-wise. It's 13. Not surprisingly, Argentina is in one there too. So, but there's other places where all these weird things in compensation take place. And so do your homework. The actual cost of an employee might triple or quadruple because of all the taxes and government regulations. To pay somebody $100 or the equivalent of $100, it might cost you $400. So a lot of things to take into account there. And then finally, hiring. Hiring, good news is that there's plenty of venues to advertise your requirements. And so we didn't have any problem in advertising. The one caveat is that you need to make the fact that you are hiring remote super explicit. We put in every job posting, like you see here, that this position is remote. Optionally, you can come to the office. It's kind of reverse. And that has given us a lot of good results. However, as you grow, and in the time between you are 10 and the time you are 200, there's a gray area where you might not yet have a formal HR department. We do now. We have a VP of HR. And she has full organization to deal with recruitment, for example. So in between, even though I know that recruiters, some people think they're like as bad as lawyers, perhaps, or others. Recruiters, if you find a good recruiter, it is well worth what you will pay them because you will save a lot of time. We had I think our success ratio, or if you take 100 applicants to the guy that we hire, is probably less than 1%. Let's switch over to the second challenge. So communication and collaboration. The first one is it's obvious, and it's time zone, and it sucks. And there's no really a good answer for this. So you kind of have to embrace it. From my personal experience, the Americas and EMEA are easier to deal with. The moment you have customers in Asia Pacific, that's when things get more complicated because you get into black holes of time zones. And so in the beginning, until you build your regional teams, it is an unfortunate fact of your life. And somebody will have to wake up early, and somebody will have to stay late for those conference calls, right? We made the decision to, let me give you a concrete example. So our support team, which is the first one that we built with 7/24 coverage, 365 days, all of, follow the sun, is one of the first teams that was converted into regional teams. So we explicitly hire in those time zones to provide them with independence. So we don't have somebody necessarily in Argentina waking up for somebody in Australia, right? But this emphasizes the importance of another side effect of working remote, which is async communications, and so written communications. One of the key traits that we look for when we look for candidates and we look for new employees is the written skills. Can they communicate in written form? Because guess what? You will put a message on your chat, or you would leave a Trello card somewhere, and somebody will read it. And so that async nature of interactions requires excellent written communication skills. No surprise. Another lesson learned is it's the overuse or the misuse of the communication channels. So I have a heuristic, which is if a conversation on chat goes more than 3 page scrolls, that's no place to have a conversation in chat. If there is like a disagreement on something and you end up writing paragraphs that are like, I don't know, seven sentences long or so, that's not the place to have that conversation. And we have put in place training and a specific guidance to upgrade the communication or to switch over to a channel that works better. And so here's an example of a real one where you see there's like some disagreement between a developer, Sole, and one of the designers, Juli, and it's much longer than this. But you see the consequence of acting on that specific best practice, which is, okay, let's switch over to video because here we exhausted the means, right? There's no silver bullet here. The nice thing, and one thing that I really like about the being distributed and relying so much on written communication is that you kind of leave a trail of your entire history. It's kind of funny and fun to go back and say, 2014, let's take a look at the discussion that we had with this particular customer. And there's like a trail of history that has been left there, right? And so we have many means of capturing the knowledge, especially important once your teams grow, because the knowledge that goes through individuals, especially individuals like myself. I am one of the founders of the company, so a lot of the institutional knowledge goes through me. Who knows about X? Who knows about Y? Oh, let's ask Eugenio. So over time, we've made the explicit effort of putting the knowledge in places where it could be heavily reused. And so everything goes to our knowledge bases, everything goes to our wikis, everything goes to our documentation website. And here's another tip for you, is that oftentimes we write documentation always with the customer first. There's very, very little internal-only documentation in Auth0. That is not, of course, let's say, HR related. But everything else, in terms of customers or things, the product, of course, there's very, very little internal-only documentation for the product. We write our documentation first for public consumption, and then we might have versions or tweaks that are for internal only. Switching over now for the final topic, culture and leadership. So there's no substitution for human connection. So you can have the best video conferencing system, the best quality in video, the best monitors, the best chat system, whatever. It doesn't matter. As I said before, the human contact cannot be fully replaced, ever. Or maybe when we'll turn into AI entities, but not at the moment. So we do the company meeting once per year. I'm going to keep that, as long as we can. So far, we've been very successful for that. And it's been, even though it's a big investment, believe me, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to make it happen. We proved that it's well worth the investment. But that's not the only instance for having one-on-one conversations. So from the company to teams that need to collaborate between each other, we do and encourage them to meet in person often. And so My team, for example, has my immediate team, leadership team, has quarterly meetings face-to-face. And we switch where we do it as well. So we do it once in Seattle, once in BA, as an example. For the time being, it's been like one-on-one, giving us the chance to connect with others, not just in our immediate, sphere of influence, right? So, and that we do also monthly meetings, maybe with smaller teams. So the human connection, it's irreplaceable. And then I talked about the, culture and training and defining what that. We are super explicit about what are the expectations. And this has been extremely important as we built the middle management. Is the managers who were not there in the beginning, who were not there in the first days of the existence of the company. I might not have all those elements. So we invest very, very heavily into making sure that we drive and we codify the behaviors that we want to see happening in our company. And last is the aligning of everything. This is going to be a major challenge for you, and something that we honestly, I cannot say 100% that we don't have any problems along these lines. One of the things that happens in a company that grows over time is the path towards specialization. So my team, as a good example of this, I run customer success. So that's my formal scope. I am responsible and accountable for customer success in Auth0. And customer success was everything except product and legal, right? So support and documentation and the customer portal and post-sales and pre-sales, technical engagement, all of that was customer success. It was like a big bag of a lot of disciplines. And over time, we've specialized and we took like a field engineer that was great working with customers and say, well, this is going to be a post-sales engineer. There's going to be an implementation engineer or an onboarding engineer. So we'll see like this progressively, over time, you will progressively specialize into different buckets. And the risk in doing that is losing alignment, is not knowing what pre-sales is doing with post-sales, or what a new feature that the product is released that needs to be communicated across. So, constant learning out there. This is a summary slide, so I'm going to skip it. But I'm going to leave you with my last best practice, another training, video training.
Check.
Oops.
Okay.
Everything appears to be in order, so we should be good. Why don't you have a good rest of your day?
All right, you too. Thank you.
And it has never happened.